shit, I got no love.
BTS news. The air inside the stadium trembled long before the first note of music ever touched it. Thousands of voices, layered into one roaring wave, surged upward and echoed against steel beams and massive LED panels. It was the kind of energy that only a global phenomenon like BTS could summon, an anticipation so intense it felt almost alive, pulsing, breathing, waiting. Backstage, however, the atmosphere was strikingly different. It was quieter than usual, not silent but tense. Staff members moved with purpose, their footsteps quick, their whispers clipped. Earpieces buzzed with urgent communication. A stage manager checked his tablet again and again, as if hoping the numbers on the screen would change. But they didn't. Something wasn't right. Just minutes before the show, something unexpected had happened to BTS. Inside one of the private dressing rooms, Jungkook stood near the mirror, his stage outfit half complete. The glittering jacket hung open, his in-ear monitors resting loosely around his neck. Normally, he would be stretching, warming up his vocals, maybe even joking around with the others. But now, he wasn't moving. He was staring, not at himself, but at nothing. Jungkook. The voice came softly from behind him. Park Jimin stepped closer, his expression shifting from casual concern to something deeper the moment he saw Jungkook's face. There was no panic there.
No visible distress.
But there was something else, something heavier. A stillness. "I'm fine," Jungkook said quickly, almost too quickly. Jimin didn't believe him. He knew Jungkook too well. Across the hall, Kim Taeyoung, known to fans as V, peeked into the room, sensing the unusual quiet. "They're calling for final check," he said, though his voice carried a question more than a statement. No one responded immediately, because at that exact moment, the unexpected turned into something undeniable. Jungkook swayed, just slightly, but enough. Jimin's hand shot out instantly, gripping his arm before he could lose balance. "Hey, what's going on?" His voice was sharper now, edged with urgency. Within seconds, the room filled. Kim Namjoon entered first, his leader instincts kicking in the moment he sensed the shift. Behind him came Young Hoseok, Min Yoongi, and Kim Seokjin. 7 members, usually synchronized in energy and movement, now gathered in a tight circle of concern. "What happened?" Namjoon asked, calm but firm. "I don't know," Jimin replied honestly. "He just stopped." Jungkook straightened himself, pulling slightly away, as if trying to reclaim control of the moment. "I said I'm fine," he insisted, forcing a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But the timing was impossible to ignore. Outside, the crowd roared louder, chanting their name in unison. BTS, BTS, BTS. Inside, time seemed to slow. A staff member knocked urgently. 2 minutes to stage. 2 minutes. That was all. 2 minutes before the lights would dim, before the intro VCR would roll, before millions of fans, both in the stadium and watching worldwide, would expect perfection. And right now, something felt off. Namjoon stepped closer to Jungkook, lowering his voice so only the members could hear. "Talk to me." For a brief second, Jungkook hesitated. And in that hesitation, everything was said. He started, then stopped. His gaze dropped, his fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the table. "It's nothing serious. Just a moment." Yoongi watched him carefully, his sharp eyes catching what others might miss. "That didn't look like nothing," he said quietly. Hoseok, usually the source of bright energy, was uncharacteristically serious. "We can delay," he suggested. "Just a few minutes. The show can wait." But Jungkook shook his head immediately.
No.
The answer came fast.
Firm. No dilas.
Not tonight. Because tonight wasn't just another concert. It was one of the biggest stops of their tour. A sold-out stadium. Global live stream. Fans who had waited months, some even years, for this exact moment. Jungkook knew that. They all did. Jin crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to prove anything," he said, his voice gentle but steady. Jungkook looked up at him, something flickering in his eyes. "I'm not trying to prove anything," he replied softly. I just don't want to disappoint them. A family. Outside, the countdown began. 30 seconds. The lights backstage dimmed slightly as the stage system prepared for the opening sequence. The low hum of bass from the speakers vibrated through the floor. Jungkook closed his eyes for just a moment. One breath in, one breath out. When he opened them again, something had changed. The uncertainty was still there, but now it was steadied by something stronger. Resolve. Namjoon nodded, as if silently confirming what he saw. "We go together," he said. No one argued, because there was nothing to argue. They always did. As the intro music began to rise, echoing through the stadium like a distant storm, the 7 members lined up in position. Shadows stretched across the stage entrance, the bright lights just beyond the curtain waiting to reveal them. The crowd's roar became deafening. And then, they stepped out. The explosion of sound was immediate, overwhelming, electric. Lights flashed, flames shot upward, and the massive screens lit up with their faces. To the audience, everything looked perfect, flawless, exactly as expected. But beneath that perfection, something deeper was unfolding. From the very first move, it was clear that tonight was different. There was an intensity in their performance that went beyond choreography. Every step, every note, every glance carried a weight that couldn't be rehearsed. Jungkook, in particular, moved with a kind of raw emotion that was impossible to ignore. His vocals were powerful, but there was a slight edge to them, a vulnerability that made each line feel more real, more human. Fans noticed. They always did. Social media began to light up within minutes. Is it just me, or does Jungkook seem different tonight? Something feels emotional. I can't explain it. He's smiling, but his eyes. Backstage monitors captured every angle, every expression. Staff members exchanged glances, aware that something unexpected had indeed happened, but also witnessing something extraordinary unfold in response. Because instead of breaking the performance, it transformed it. Midway through the set, during one of their slower songs, the stage lights softened. The crowd quieted, swaying gently, thousands of light sticks glowing like a galaxy. Jungkook stepped forward. For a moment, he didn't sing. He just looked out, at the fans, at the endless sea of faces that had come to see them. And then, finally, he spoke. Sometimes, he began, his voice softer than usual, but carrying effortlessly across the stadium. Even right before something important, things don't feel perfect. The crowd grew even quieter. The other members watched him, not interrupting. Sometimes you feel unsure, or tired, or like you're not ready, he continued. A pause. A real one. By the time the final song ended, the energy in the stadium had shifted completely. What began as anticipation had transformed into something deeper, connection, understanding, something almost indescribable. As the members stood together for their final bow, hands linked, breathing heavily but smiling genuinely, the earlier tension seemed distant.
I'll never slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't